My parents cut me off for having a baby in college, saying I had ruined my future, and kicked me out of the house in my 7th month of pregnancy. My younger brother Jake, who was always the favorite, secretly took me into his apartment and helped me with everything while I raised my son alone. I remember that night, Christmas dinner at the country club, 7 years later. My mother stood at the podium, champagne glass raised, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she announced Jake's engagement to Victoria Chen, daughter of the Chen technology empire. The room erupted in applause. My mother's eyes found mine across the room, and her smile turned razor sharp. "Of course, not all my children made choices I'm proud of," she said, her voice carrying over the clinking glasses. "But at least one turned out successful." The room went silent. Waiters froze mid-pour. Victoria's father shifted uncomfortably. I felt my 5-year-old son, Nathan, grip my hand tighter under the table. Jake's face drained of color. He started to stand, but Victoria placed her perfectly manicured hand on his arm, stopping him. My father raised his glass higher, as if toasting to my humiliation. I could hear whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. There she is, the daughter who got knocked up, still struggling, probably here begging for money. My mother took another sip of champagne, savoring the moment like expensive wine. Nathan looked up at me with those big brown eyes, confused why Grandma was being mean. I squeezed his hand gently, then did something no one expected. I stood up, smoothed my dress, the one I'd bought at a thrift store, and altered myself, and smiled. Not a sad smile, not an embarrassed smile, a knowing smile. "Thank you, Mother, for that touching speech," I said, my voice steady and clear. The room's attention snapped to me. "I appreciate you reminding everyone here about the choices I made." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope, holding it up for everyone to see. "Since we're sharing family news tonight, I have an announcement, too." My mother's face twitched, just barely, but I caught it. That flicker of uncertainty. Jake was staring at me now, his expression unreadable. I walked toward the podium, heels clicking against the marble floor, every eye in that room following me. My mother's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Because while they'd spent 7 years treating me like the family embarrassment, I'd been building something they never saw. And tonight, in front of their precious social circle, they were about to find out exactly what their discarded daughter had become. I placed the envelope on the podium next to my mother's champagne glass. Her perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the tightness in her jaw. "What is this?" she hissed under her breath, but her microphone was still on. Everyone heard the edge in her voice. "Just some documents," I said calmly. "Nothing to worry about." I turned to face the crowd. 7 years ago, my parents made it very clear that I was no longer part of this family. They cut me off, kicked me out while I was 7 months pregnant, and told everyone I'd ruined my life. I paused, letting that sink in. What they didn't tell you was that my brother Jake defied them. He took me in, helped me with Nathan, paid for my medical bills, and never asked for anything in return. Jake's eyes widened. Victoria's grip on his arm loosened slightly. My father stood up from his seat, his face reddening. "Rebecca, this is not the time or place." "Oh, but it is, Dad," I interrupted. "Because you made it the time and place when Mom decided to humiliate me in front of 200 people. I looked back at my mother. "You want to talk about choices? Let's talk about yours." The room was dead silent now. Even the waiters had stopped pretending to work. Nathan sat at our table watching me with complete trust. That little boy had given me strength when I had nothing else. When Jake started helping me, he asked you both for one thing. Just to acknowledge Nathan as your grandson. To let me come to family dinners. You refused. You told him if he continued supporting me, you'd write him out of the will. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "He recorded that conversation, Mom. Would you like me to play it?" My mother's face went white. "You're blaming us for your mistakes?" "I'm not done," I said, my voice cutting through hers like a knife. "Jake chose me anyway. He helped me finish my degree while working full-time. He babysat Nathan while I studied for the bar exam. Yes, the bar exam. I'm an attorney now, Mother, specialized in family law and corporate litigation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Patterson, one of my mother's closest friends, leaned forward in her seat. Mr. Chen, Victoria's father, was watching me with undisguised interest now. "But here's where it gets interesting," I continued. 3 years ago, Jake came to me with a problem. He'd discovered something about the family business, Morrison Real Estate Holdings, something that kept him up at night. I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. He found out that Dad had been using company funds to pay off a mistress. Not just any mistress, his paralegal, Diane Foster, for 12 years. The room exploded. My father lunged toward the podium, but Jake stood up, blocking his path. "It's true, Dad," Jake said quietly. "I found the bank transfers. The apartment you bought her in the city. Everything." My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She stood frozen, staring at my father with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, unadulterated betrayal. "Wait, there's more," I said, pulling out another document. "Mom, remember how you always bragged about your charity work? The Morrison Foundation for Underprivileged Youth? Turns out you've been skimming donations. $247,000 over the past 6 years, funneled into your personal shopping accounts." My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's a lie. You fabricated those documents." "Actually, they're from your accountant, Harold Chen," I said, looking directly at Mr. Chen. "Yes, Victoria's uncle. He came to me 6 months ago with concerns about the foundation's books. He's been cooperating with the IRS investigation ever since." Mr. Chen's face hardened. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on my parents. "Is this true, Richard? Patricia?" My father couldn't meet his gaze. My mother grabbed the podium for support. "The IRS will be filing charges next week," I continued. "Tax fraud, embezzlement, and several other charges I won't bore everyone with tonight. The Morrison Foundation is being dissolved, and all assets are being seized. Your accountant has already testified against you in exchange for immunity." Victoria stood up, her face pale. "Mr. Chen, I had no idea." "We need to leave," Mr. Chen said firmly, taking his daughter's arm. "Jake, I suggest you distance yourself from this situation immediately." Jake looked at me, then at Victoria, then at our parents. "I already have, sir. 3 months ago, I transferred all my assets out of the family accounts. Rebecca helped me set up my own business, Morrison Independent Consulting. It's doing very well." My mother finally found her voice. "You ungrateful little, after everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done?" I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You threw your pregnant daughter out on the street. You told Jake you'd disown him for helping me. You spent 7 years pretending Nathan didn't exist." I walked back to our table and put my hand on Nathan's shoulder. "This little boy is brilliant. He reads at a 3rd grade level already. He's kind, funny, and resilient. And you've missed every single moment of his life because you were too concerned with your reputation." Nathan looked up at me, then at his grandparents. "Mommy, why is Grandma crying?" "Because she's realizing what she lost, baby," I said softly. My father stepped forward, his face a mask of rage. "You planned this. You orchestrated this entire thing to destroy us." "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the envelope. Jake will be testifying at your trial. So will I. And so will Uncle Harold, Diane Foster, and about 15 other people who are tired of covering for you." The guests were already standing up, gathering their coats, whispering frantically to each other. My parents' social circle was disintegrating before their eyes. Mrs. Patterson walked past without making eye contact. The Johnsons practically ran for the exit. Even the club manager appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison," he said quietly, "I'm going to have to ask you to settle your account tonight. The club's board has decided to suspend your membership pending the outcome of these allegations." My mother collapsed into a chair, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. My father just stood there, staring at me with something between hatred and disbelief. Jake walked over and stood beside me. "We should go," he said quietly. I nodded. I picked up Nathan, who wrapped his arms around my neck. As we walked toward the exit, I stopped next to my mother one last time. "You were right about one thing, Mom. I did make a choice 7 years ago. I chose to keep my son and build a life without you. That was the best decision I ever made." We left the country club to the sound of my mother's sobs and the flash of camera phones capturing the Morrison family's spectacular downfall. As we stepped into the cold December air, Jake squeezed my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked down at Nathan, then at my brother, the only family member who'd ever truly mattered. "I'm perfect," I said. And for the first time in 7 years, I meant it. The news hit social media before we even made it to Jake's car. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, screenshots of my parents' faces, videos of my mother's microphone catching her breakdown, Think pieces about nepotism and family wealth already being drafted by local journalists. Nathan had fallen asleep against my shoulder, exhausted from the drama he didn't fully understand. "They're going to come after you," Jake said as he drove through the empty streets. "Dad still has connections, lawyers, friends in positions of power. Let them try," I said. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, calculated satisfaction. I have 3 filing cabinets full of evidence: bank statements, emails, recorded phone calls, testimony from 12 different witnesses. Harold Chen isn't the only person who's been talking to federal investigators. Jake glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day you showed me those bank transfers," I admitted. 3 years, Jake. I spent 3 years building an airtight case while going to every single one of Nathan's school events, working 60-hour weeks at the firm and pretending I'd moved on. I stroked Nathan's hair gently. They thought I was too busy surviving to pay attention. That was their first mistake. We pulled up to Jake's apartment building, the same one where he'd hidden me all those years ago. It looked different now. Smaller, somehow. I'd spent so many nights here, crying on his couch while Nathan slept in a bassinet made from a laundry basket. Jake had given up his bedroom, sleeping on that same couch for 8 months until I could afford my own place. Inside, Jake made coffee while I put Nathan to bed in the guest room. When I came back out, he was sitting at the kitchen table staring at his phone. "Victoria texted," he said quietly. "She wants to postpone the wedding. Her father's furious." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Jake had been genuinely happy with Victoria. He shook his head. "Don't be. If she can't handle this, then she's not the person I thought she was." He looked up at me. Her text said, "I can't be associated with this scandal. Not 'Are you okay?' or 'What can I do to help?' Just concern about her reputation." I sat down across from him. "You deserve better than that." "Yeah," he said with a hollow laugh. "Guess it runs in the family. Caring more about appearance than actual people." He rubbed his face. "God, Becca, when did they become such monsters?" "They always were," I said softly. "We just couldn't see it because we were on the inside. The golden children, remember? You were the son who'd take over the business. I was the daughter who'd marry well and produce perfect grandchildren at the socially appropriate time." I took a sip of coffee. I deviated from the script. That made me expendable. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Rebecca Morrison?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Sandra Kim from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I apologize for calling so late, but we've been monitoring the situation. Your parents attempted to access their offshore accounts approximately 40 minutes ago. All accounts have been frozen per our investigation." I felt a smile spreading across my face. "They're trying to run. They won't get far," Sandra assured me. "We have their passports flagged. If they attempt to leave the country, they'll be detained at the airport. I wanted to give you advance warning. We're moving up the timeline. Arrests will happen tomorrow morning instead of next week." "Thank you for letting me know," I said. After I hung up, Jake was staring at me. "Offshore accounts? Becca, what else don't I know?" I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder labeled Morrison Case Files. Dad's been hiding money in the Cayman Islands for years. $3.7 million in untaxed income from real estate deals he never reported. Mom's charity fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. I turned the screen so he could see. There's also illegal property rezoning. Dad bribed city officials to change zoning laws so he could develop protected wetlands. That's federal environmental violations on top of everything else. Jake scrolled through the documents, his face growing paler. "How did you find all this?" "I'm very good at my job," I said simply. And when Harold came to me about the foundation, I started digging deeper. I hired a forensic accountant, a private investigator. I spent every spare dollar I had for 2 years building this case. I closed the laptop. They thought I was struggling, barely making rent. I let them think that. Meanwhile, I was making partner at one of the best firms in the state. You made partner? 6 months ago. They wanted to announce it, but I asked them to keep it quiet. I leaned back in my chair. I needed Mom and Dad to still see me as the failure, the struggling single mother they could look down on. It made them careless. Jake shook his head in amazement. "You played them. They played themselves," I corrected. "I just documented their crimes and handed the evidence to people who could do something about it. Everything that's happening to them now, they did to themselves." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my boss, Martin Rodriguez. "Saw the videos? Impressive work. Client meeting tomorrow at 9. The Chen family wants to discuss representation." I showed Jake the text. "Mr. Chen wants me to represent him? He wants to make sure his brother doesn't implicate him in anything," I explained. "Harold only handled Mom's foundation. Mr. Chen runs a legitimate business empire. He's protecting his assets." I typed back a confirmation. "This is good. Really good. The Chen account could mean a 7-figure retainer for the firm. So while mom and dad lose everything, you're gaining their former business partner as a client? Poetic, isn't it? I said. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had happened settling over us. Then Jake said quietly, I got a call too, from Morrison Real Estate. The board wants to meet with me tomorrow. They're discussing an emergency restructuring now that dad's about to be indicted. I raised an eyebrow. They want you to take over? Apparently, I'm the only Morrison they can legally put in charge since I separated my finances months ago. You helped me do that, remember? He laughed bitterly. They spent my whole life telling me I'd inherit the company. Now I'm getting it because they're going to prison. Are you going to accept? Jake was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. That company is built on their corruption. Every property, every deal, how much of it is legitimate? He looked at me. Would you help me figure that out? Officially, I mean, as my attorney. Yes, I said without hesitation. But Jake, if we do this, we do it right. We audit everything. If there are more victims of dad's schemes, we make it right. If properties were obtained illegally, we return them. The company gets rebuilt from the ground up. Clean. That could take years. It might even bankrupt the company. Then we'll rebuild something new, I said firmly. Something that isn't tainted by what they did. Something Nathan can actually be proud of one day. Jake nodded slowly. Morrison Independent Holdings. A fresh start. Exactly. My phone buzzed again, this time a news alert. Morrison Real Estate executives face federal charges. Breaking investigation reveals years of fraud. The article already had quotes from Harold Chen, the club manager, even some of my parents' former employees who'd apparently been waiting years to tell their stories about hostile work environments and financial manipulation. The narrative was forming in real time. The corrupt real estate moguls brought down by their own children. The daughter they abandoned who became their legal nemesis. The son who chose integrity over inheritance. It was already being called the Morrison scandal on Twitter, with hashtags trending nationwide. They're going to hate us forever, Jake said, reading over my shoulder. They already did, I reminded him. The only difference now is that everyone else knows why. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably still at the country club, or maybe they'd gone home to their mansion, the one that would be seized by federal marshals in less than 12 hours. I wondered if they were finally talking to each other honestly, or if they were already turning on each other, each trying to save themselves. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel conflicted. I felt calm, clear, justified. Becca? Jake's voice brought me back. Are you sure you're okay? This is still our parents. Despite everything, they stopped being my parents the day they threw me out, I said, turning to face him. They stopped being your parents every time they threatened you for helping me. We don't owe them anything. Not loyalty, not mercy, not silence. Jake nodded, but I could see the struggle in his eyes. He'd always been softer than me, more hopeful that they'd change. I just keep thinking about when we were kids, Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom making pancakes on Sunday mornings. They weren't always like this. Yes, they were, I said gently. We just didn't see it because it wasn't directed at us yet, but I guarantee there were other people they hurt along the way. Other people they looked down on, stepped on, destroyed. We were just protected because we were theirs. I walked back to the table and squeezed his shoulder. Now we're choosing to protect the people they hurt instead. That's who we are now. He covered my hand with his. When did you get so strong? When I had to be, I said. When it was either collapse or survive. And Nathan needed me to survive. I glanced toward the guest room where my son slept peacefully. Every time they refused to acknowledge him, every Christmas they didn't invite us to, every family photo he wasn't in, that made me stronger, harder, more determined. They created their own enemy, Jake said. Yes, I agreed. They did. The arrests happened at 6:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because Sandra Kim texted me a photo. My parents in handcuffs being led out of their mansion by federal agents. My mother wasn't wearing makeup. My father's hair was disheveled. They both looked smaller somehow, diminished without their usual armor of expensive clothes and practiced superiority. I was already at the office when the text came through. I'd been there since 4 a.m., preparing for the Chen meeting and drafting documents for Jake's transition to head of Morrison Real Estate. Nathan was at Jake's apartment with a babysitter, a trusted college student who'd been with us for 2 years. Martin knocked on my door frame. They're here. Conference room 3. Mr. Chen sat at the head of the table with Victoria and 3 other executives from Chen Technology. Victoria wouldn't meet my eyes. Her father, however, studied me with sharp intelligence. "Ms. Morrison," he said, or should I say, Attorney Morrison. "I believe congratulations on your partnership are in order, though you've kept that achievement remarkably quiet." "Thank you, Mr. Chen." I set my briefcase down and pulled out a legal pad. "I understand you have concerns about your brother's involvement with my mother's foundation." "Concerns is putting it mildly," one of the executives said. "Harold's testimony could implicate our entire corporation in Mr. Chen held up a hand, silencing him. "My brother came to you 6 months ago, correct?" "Yes, sir. He discovered irregularities in the foundation's books and wanted legal advice on how to proceed. I advised him to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. He's not being charged with any crimes." "Because you protected him," Mr. Chen said. "It wasn't a question." "Because he did the right thing the moment he discovered wrongdoing," I corrected. "He's not responsible for my mother's fraud. He's the one who exposed it." Victoria finally spoke up. "And your brother? Jake?" I met her gaze steadily. "What about him? Is he implicated in any of this? Because if he is, I need to know." "Victoria?" Her father cut her off sharply. "That's not why we're here." But I answered anyway. "Jake separated his finances from my parents 3 months ago with my guidance. He reported everything he knew to the authorities. He's clean." I leaned forward slightly. "The question isn't whether Jake is implicated. The question is whether you're going to stand by him or run away to protect your reputation." The room went silent. Mr. Chen's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're direct. I appreciate that." He opened a folder and slid it across the table. "Chen Technology wants to retain your firm. Specifically, you. We're expanding into real estate development and need someone who understands the industry's legal pitfalls intimately." I scanned the contract. The retainer was $250,000 annually, with additional fees for litigation. It was more than I'd made in the past 3 years combined. "There's a condition," Mr. Chen continued. "Your brother will be restructuring Morrison Real Estate. I want you to ensure that restructuring happens cleanly. Any properties obtained through illegal means will be dealt with appropriately. Any victims of your father's schemes will be compensated. I want Morrison Real Estate to become a legitimate partner for Chen Technologies development projects. You want me to clean up my father's mess so you can profit from it," I said bluntly. "I want to ensure that Morrison Real Estate doesn't collapse and take hundreds of employees' jobs with it," Mr. Chen countered. "Your father employed 263 people, Ms. Morrison. Most of them had nothing to do with his crimes. They have families, mortgages, children in college." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm offering you the resources to save those jobs while still holding your parents accountable. Isn't that what you want?" He was right, and he knew it. I signed the contract. After the meeting, Victoria followed me into the hallway. "Rebecca, wait." I turned, my hand already on the elevator button. "What?" "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About last night, the text I sent Jake. That was my panic talking, not my heart." "Your panic or your father's PR team?" She flinched. "Both, probably. But I've been thinking about it all night. Jake told me everything. About helping you 7 years ago, about your parents threatening to disown him. He gave up everything for you and your son." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "I want to be the kind of person who would do that, who would choose right over easy." "Then be that person," I said. "But don't do it for Jake. Don't do it because you think it'll make you look good. Do it because it's actually who you are." "Is that what you did? Took down your parents because it's who you are?" "No," I said honestly. "I did it because they deserved it. Because they hurt people and never faced consequences. Because my son needed to see that justice actually exists in the world." The elevator dinged open. "Jake loves you, Victoria. But if you can't handle being with someone whose family is messy and complicated and publicly disgraced, then let him go now. Don't string him along while you decide if he's worth the social cost." I stepped into the elevator, leaving her standing in the hallway with tears in her eyes. Back at my desk, I found an email from the Morrison Real Estate Board. They were offering Jake the position of CEO effective immediately, pending a complete audit of all company finances and operations. My phone would be ringing any minute with Jake asking for advice. It rang, but it wasn't Jake. "Rebecca Morrison," a man's voice I didn't recognize. "This is Detective Marcus Webb with the City Police Fraud Division. We've been reviewing your parents' case file and found something interesting. A property your father developed 8 years ago. The Riverside Luxury Apartments?" I pulled up my files on my computer. "What about it?" "The land was seized from an elderly woman named Dorothy Fletcher through eminent domain. Your father claimed it was necessary for public development, got the city council to approve it, then built luxury apartments instead of the promised community center. Detective Webb paused. Mrs. Fletcher died 3 years ago, but she has a daughter, Sarah Fletcher Ortiz. She's been trying to sue your father for years, but he's buried her in legal motions. With your help, we could actually get her justice. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up every document related to Riverside. Send me everything you have. I'll contact Mrs. Fletcher Ortiz personally. You'd work against your own father? Detective Webb? I said. I'm the one who gave the U.S. Attorney's Office most of their evidence. My father stopped being my father a long time ago. He's just a criminal who happens to share my DNA. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair. The walls were closing in on my parents from every direction. Federal charges, state charges, civil lawsuits from victims I was actively helping contact. By the time this was over, they wouldn't just be broke and imprisoned. They'd be completely, utterly destroyed. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Board offered me CEO. What do I do? I called him. Take it. But we do this my way. Full audit, victim compensation, complete restructuring. Your first act as CEO is to announce cooperation with all ongoing investigations and establish a victims' compensation fund. That'll bankrupt us. Then we'll rebuild, I said. But we rebuild clean, or we don't rebuild at all. There was a long pause. Then, Victoria came by. She apologized, asked if we could talk. What did you say? I told her I needed time to think, that I can't be with someone who disappears when things get hard, he sighed. I love her, Becca, but you're right. I deserve someone who stands by me no matter what. You do, I agreed. And Jake, whatever you decide about the company, about Victoria, about any of this, I'm with you. Always. I know. That's why I'm still standing. After we hung up, I opened my email and started drafting a message to Sarah Fletcher Ortiz, then another to a former Morrison real estate employee who'd contacted me about workplace harassment, then another to a family my father had evicted during the pandemic despite city protection orders. The list of my parents' victims was long, but one by one, I was going to help every single person they'd hurt. It would take years. It would consume my career, but watching my parents lose everything wasn't enough. I wanted them to see, from their prison cells, that every person they'd stepped on was being made whole. I wanted them to know that their children, the ones they'd discarded and manipulated, were the ones making it right. That would be true justice, and I was just getting started. The trial started on a cold morning in March. 4 months after that Christmas dinner, my parents sat at the defense table looking hollow and aged. My mother had lost weight. Her designer suit hung loose on her frame. My father's hands trembled as he flipped through documents his lawyers presented. They'd hired the best legal team money could buy, or rather, money borrowed against properties that were being seized by the government. I sat in the gallery next to Jake, both of us subpoenaed as prosecution witnesses. Nathan was at school, blissfully unaware that his grandparents were facing a combined 97 criminal charges. The prosecution called me to the stand on day 3. Ms. Morrison, the assistant U.S. attorney began, "Can you explain your relationship to the defendants? Richard and Patricia Morrison are my biological parents," I said clearly. They disowned me 7 years ago when I became pregnant during college. My mother's lawyer objected immediately. "Relevance, Your Honor. It establishes bias and background," the prosecutor responded. "The defense has already implied that Ms. Morrison fabricated evidence out of revenge. We're establishing that she had cause to be thorough in her investigation." The judge allowed it. For the next 2 hours, I walked the jury through every piece of evidence I'd collected. Bank transfers showing my father paying Diane Foster $63,000 over 12 years. Emails where my mother instructed Harold Chen to get creative with foundation finances. Text messages where my father coordinated bribes to city officials using coded language that our forensic analyst had decoded. During cross-examination, my mother's lawyer went for the throat. "Isn't it true, Ms. Morrison, that you resented your parents for cutting you off?" "Yes," I said simply. "And that this entire investigation was motivated by revenge?" "No. It was motivated by justice for their victims." I looked directly at the jury. If I wanted simple revenge, I would have leaked this to the press. Instead, I spent 3 years building an airtight legal case and cooperating with federal investigators to ensure a proper prosecution. You waited until Christmas dinner to expose them publicly. I exposed them at a public event where they chose to humiliate me in front of 200 witnesses. I corrected. My timing was strategic. Their cruelty provided the platform. The lawyer tried several more angles, but I'd been preparing for this moment for years. Every answer was precise, documented, unshakable. When I stepped down, I saw my mother crying silently, but I felt nothing. Jake testified next. confirming everything I'd said and providing additional evidence about the company's financial irregularities. When my father's lawyer suggested Jake was lying to inherit the company, Jake responded with devastating calm. I already am CEO. The board appointed me after removing my father. I gain nothing from his conviction except peace of mind that he's being held accountable. The parade of victims was relentless. Sarah Fletcher Ortiz testified about watching her elderly mother lose her home and die heartbroken. Diane Foster testified that my father had threatened to destroy her career if she ever left him. Former employees described a workplace of fear and retaliation. City officials who'd accepted bribes testified with immunity, explaining exactly how my father had corrupted the development approval process. By week 2, my parents' defense was crumbling. Their lawyers tried to claim my father's affair was irrelevant to the financial crimes, but the prosecution demonstrated it showed a pattern of deception and misuse of company funds. They tried to paint my mother's charity embezzlement as accounting errors, but Harold Chen's testimony destroyed that narrative with forensic precision. I attended every day of the trial. I wanted my parents to see me there, calm and professional, working on my laptop during breaks, often on cases helping their victims file civil suits. Sometimes Nathan's drawings were in my briefcase, visible when I opened it. Small reminders of the grandson they'd rejected, the life they'd dismissed as worthless. The jury deliberated for 6 days. When they returned, I was in the courtroom with Jake and Nathan. I'd pulled him from school because I wanted him to see this, to understand that actions have consequences. On count 1, wire fraud, we find the defendant Richard Morrison guilty. My father's face went gray. On count 2, tax evasion, we find the defendant Richard Morrison guilty. 34 counts. 34 times the jury foreman said guilty. My father was convicted on every single charge. My mother received guilty verdicts on 22 of her 23 counts. The jury couldn't reach consensus on 1 charge of obstruction, but it didn't matter. The sentencing hearing happened 3 weeks later. Sarah Fletcher Ortiz gave a victim impact statement that left half the courtroom in tears. So did 7 other victims. Jake read a statement about growing up watching his parents prioritize money over integrity and finally understanding that their love was always conditional. I didn't make a statement. I didn't need to. My work spoke for itself. The judge sentenced my father to 18 years in federal prison. My mother received 12 years. Both were ordered to pay restitution totaling $4.3 million, money they no longer had. The mansion was sold at auction. The cars were seized. My mother's jewelry collection, including that diamond bracelet she'd worn to my public humiliation, was sold to help fund the victim compensation program Jake and I had established. Morrison Real Estate was completely restructured. Jake hired a new executive team, implemented ethics training for all employees, and established an independent oversight board. We returned properties obtained through illegal means and paid settlements to 17 families my father had wronged. The company was smaller now, leaner, but legitimate. Chen Technology signed a development partnership agreement worth $12 million over 5 years. As for Diane Foster, she testified that my father had promised to leave my mother and marry her for years, but never did. She cooperated fully with prosecutors. She didn't go to prison, but her career in real estate law was over. She moved to another state to start over, 48 years old with nothing to show for 12 years of being someone's secret. My mother's charity friends abandoned her immediately. Women who'd lunched with her every week didn't return her calls from prison. The country club formally revoked their membership and removed their names from the donor wall. Social media was brutal. Think pieces about rich people who believe they're above the law, discussions about privilege and accountability, memes about the Christmas dinner takedown that went viral worldwide. But here's what gave me the most satisfaction. 3 months after their sentencing, I received a letter from my mother. It had been screened by prison officials, so I knew it was safe to open. It was 6 pages long, handwritten in shaky script. The first 4 pages were excuses. How my father had pressured her. How she'd been depressed. How the stress of maintaining their lifestyle had pushed her to make poor choices. Classic victim narrative from someone who'd spent her life stepping on actual victims. The 5th page was different. I understand now that we were wrong to cut you off. Nathan is a beautiful boy. I saw his picture in the newspaper article about Jake's charity work. He has your eyes. I laughed out loud reading that. Even now, even from prison, she couldn't just apologize. She had to make it about what she'd missed. What she'd lost. The 6th page was the kicker. Maybe when we're released, we could try to rebuild our relationship. You've always been so strong, Rebecca. I know you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Family is everything. I put the letter in my office shredder without responding. Family was everything. That's why Jake and Nathan and I had built a real one. Without them. 2 years after the trial, I stood in the lobby of Morrison Independent Holdings, the new name Jake had given the restructured company. The building was modest compared to my father's old headquarters, but it was paid for honestly. Photos lined the walls. Jake breaking ground on an affordable housing development, the executive team volunteering at a homeless shelter, Nathan at age 7 holding a giant check from the company's scholarship fund for single parents attending college. That last photo was Jake's idea. The scholarship was named after me. "You ready?" Jake asked, adjusting his tie. Today was the grand opening of Fletcher Community Center, built on the exact site where my father's Riverside luxury apartments had stood. Sarah Fletcher Ortiz had worked with us for 18 months to make her mother's dream finally happen. The apartments had been demolished, the luxury tenants relocated with generous assistance, and the property donated to the city for public use. "Almost," I said, glancing at my phone. Victoria was running late, as usual. She and Jake had reconciled 6 months after the trial, after she'd spent those months volunteering at legal aid clinics and proving she was serious about choosing character over convenience. They'd gotten married last summer in a small ceremony. Nathan had been the ring bearer. The community center was beautiful. Dorothy Fletcher's photograph hung in the main lobby next to a plaque describing how she'd fought for years to create a space where neighborhood kids could play safely. My father's name appeared nowhere in the building, but mine did, listed among the donors and board members who'd made it possible. Sarah found me before the ceremony started. "Ms. Morrison, I just wanted to thank you again. My mother would be so proud." "Call me Rebecca," I said. "And your mother should be proud of you. You never gave up fighting for her." "Neither did you," Sarah said. "For your son, for your brother, for all of us." The ceremony was covered by 3 news stations and multiple online outlets, not because the Morrisons were scandalous anymore, but because it was a genuine human interest story. Former real estate empire makes amends. Sister and brother rebuild family legacy with integrity. Single mother attorney becomes community hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd simply refused to let bad people win. Nathan, now 7 years old, gave a short speech about how everyone deserves a safe place to play. The crowd loved him. Afterward, he ran to me with his certificate for participating. "Did I do good, Mom?" "You did perfect, baby," I said, kissing the top of his head. Jake joined us with Victoria. "Chen Technology just confirmed," he said. "They want to partner on the West Side development. Low-income housing with mixed retail should create about 300 jobs. And Chen is putting up 60% of the funding," Victoria added. "My father says you've changed the industry conversation. Other developers are watching what Morrison Independent does and following suit." That night, after Nathan was asleep, I sat in my home office, the one I'd built in the house I'd purchased with my own money, earned through my own work. My partnership had become a senior partnership. I'd argued 14 cases in the past 2 years, won 13, and built a reputation as someone who took on powerful people without fear. My mother had written 3 more times from prison. I'd shredded every letter. My father had written once, "I never meant for things to end this way. I was providing for our family." I'd sent that one back marked "Return to Sender." They'd been model prisoners, apparently, both eligible for early release after serving 2/3 of their sentences. My mother in 8 years, my father in 12. They'd be elderly by then, broken, forgotten by the social circle they'd valued so much. I felt no guilt about that. None. What I felt was satisfaction. Deep, bone-deep satisfaction. Every time I tucked Nathan into bed in our safe, stable home. Every time Jake called to celebrate another ethical business victory. Every time a victim of my parents' greed contacted me to say the compensation fund had helped them rebuild their lives. My phone buzzed with an email from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They were investigating another real estate developer for similar crimes and wanted my expertise as a consultant. The cycle continued. Bad people doing bad things, and me documenting it all with cold, precise efficiency. Some people called me ruthless. Articles had been written about whether I'd gone too far, whether destroying my parents was really justice or just revenge dressed up in legal paperwork. Online commenters debated whether I was a hero or a villain. I didn't care. Those people hadn't been 7 months pregnant and homeless. They hadn't watched their brother risk everything to help them while their parents threatened him. They hadn't spent 7 years being treated like garbage while raising a beautiful child who deserved better grandparents than the ones he'd been stuck with. The truth was simple. My parents had made choices. They'd chosen money over integrity, reputation over family, cruelty over compassion. I'd simply made sure those choices had consequences. And I'd do it again, every single time. Last month, Nathan asked me about his grandparents. He'd seen their photos in old family albums at Jake's house. "Why don't they come visit us?" he asked innocently. I'd knelt down to his level and said, "Some people make bad choices that hurt other people. When that happens, they have to face consequences. Your grandparents hurt a lot of people, including me and Uncle Jake, so they're not part of our lives anymore." "Did they hurt me too?" he asked. "They never gave themselves the chance to know you," I said. "And that's their loss because you're the most amazing person I've ever met." He'd hugged me tight and said, "I'm glad I have you and Uncle Jake instead." "Me too, baby. Me too." Now, sitting in my office, I opened my laptop and pulled up the file for the new case. Another developer exploiting vulnerable families. Another chance to hold powerful people accountable. The work never ended. There were always more victims who needed someone to fight for them. More bad people who thought they were untouchable. They weren't. I'd proven that, and I'd keep proving it. Case after case, year after year, until Nathan grew up in a world where he understood that justice wasn't just a concept. It was something real people fought for and won. My parents had cut me off, thrown me away, treated me like a shameful secret. They'd expected me to disappear, to fail, to prove them right about me ruining my future. Instead, I'd become their worst nightmare, successful, powerful, and completely unwilling to forgive. And I'd never been happier.